The live TV moment that brought down Judge Judy's empire began when she underestimated a UN Women Goodwill Ambassador. Emma Watson faced the psychological intimidation tactics that had broken thousands of guests before her. "Sweetheart, your little college degree doesn't qualify you to practice real law," Judge Judy declared with her signature cruelty. But what Emma Watson revealed next would leave Judge Judy frozen in terror and America questioning everything they thought they knew. If you want to see how a Hollywood actress exposed the dark secrets of America's most powerful TV judge, watch this entire story and don't forget to subscribe for more shocking confrontations that the legal establishment tried to cover up. The Judge Judy courtroom set buzzed with anticipation that Wednesday morning in June 2025. Judge Judy Scheindlin, at 82, had spent over 3 decades building an empire worth $440 million through her ability to psychologically destroy unprepared litigants on national television. Her show had become the highest-rated court program in television history, with millions of viewers tuning in daily to watch her demolish people with surgical precision and devastating verbal attacks. Born Judith Susan Blum in Brooklyn, Scheindlin had built her reputation as a no-nonsense family court judge in Manhattan before transitioning to television in 1996. Her courtroom persona was a carefully crafted performance designed to intimidate and humiliate. Rapid-fire questioning, dismissive interruptions, and personal attacks that left defendants emotionally shattered. The formula had made her one of the highest-paid personalities in television history, earning over $47 million annually through syndication deals and merchandising. The Judge Judy phenomenon had transcended simple entertainment to become a cultural institution. Her catchphrases like "Don't pee on my leg" and "Tell me it's raining," and "Beauty fades, dumb is forever" had entered popular lexicon. Law schools even offered courses analyzing her impact on public perception of the judicial system, though most concluded her show bore little resemblance to actual legal proceedings. But behind the judicial robes and television success, industry insiders whispered about a different Judge Judy. Former court officers and production staff, speaking anonymously to legal publications like the National Law Journal and Legal Times, described a woman who had become increasingly disconnected from actual legal practice, relying on outdated precedents and theatrical intimidation rather than sound jurisprudence. Several legal experts had privately questioned whether her show represented justice or entertainment masquerading as law. The American Bar Association had received numerous complaints over the years about Judge Judy's show potentially undermining public understanding of legal proceedings. Critics argued that her arbitrary rulings, personal attacks on litigants, and dismissal of complex legal arguments created misconceptions about how real courts operated. However, her massive popularity and entertainment value had protected her from serious scrutiny. What concerned legal professionals most was Judge Judy's influence on public expectations of the justice system. Surveys showed that regular viewers of her show expected real judges to behave similarly, creating problems for actual courts when litigants became frustrated with proper legal procedures that moved slowly and required careful consideration rather than immediate dramatic pronouncements. The case that would bring down Judge Judy's empire had started as a routine contract dispute 6 months earlier. Emma Watson, at 34, was representing a small nonprofit organization called Global Women's Initiative that had been sued by a large corporate consulting firm, Strategic Business Solutions, over alleged breach of contract. The consulting firm claimed the nonprofit had failed to meet specific performance metrics outlined in their agreement, demanding $500,000 in damages plus legal fees that would effectively bankrupt the organization. What made this case extraordinary was Watson's involvement and the underlying circumstances that had led to the dispute. The Global Women's Initiative was an organization Watson had co-founded to provide legal aid and business development support to women entrepreneurs in developing countries. The consulting contract in question had been for Strategic Business Solutions to develop sustainable business models for the nonprofit's international programs. Emma Watson's journey from child actress to legal advocate had been deliberate and methodical, driven by experiences that few people knew about. During her work as UN Women Goodwill Ambassador, she had witnessed firsthand how legal systems worldwide failed to protect women's rights and how corporate interests often trampled smaller organizations. Her famous he-for-she speech at the United Nations in 2014 had marked the beginning of her transition from entertainment to advocacy. After completing her undergraduate degree in English literature at Brown University, Watson had spent 3 years at Columbia Law School, where she graduated summa cum laude and served as an editor on the Columbia Law Review. Her law school thesis, Corporate Accountability in International Development, Legal Frameworks for Protecting Vulnerable Populations, had been published in the Harvard International Law Journal and cited by the UN Human Rights Council. Watson's legal education had been rigorous and comprehensive. She had studied under some of the most distinguished legal minds in America, including constitutional law with Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, international law with former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan during his visiting professorship, and corporate law with the chief architect of the Uniform Commercial Code. Her clinical work had included representing asylum seekers, defending victims of domestic violence, and challenging corporate practices that exploited vulnerable communities. Her transition to legal practice had been met with skepticism from some quarters who assumed her celebrity status was more important than her qualifications. However, those who worked with her quickly discovered that Watson's legal mind was formidable. She approached cases with the same methodical preparation and attention to detail that had made her successful as an actress, but now applied to constitutional law, international human rights, and corporate accountability. The case against Global Women's Initiative had become personal for Watson because it represented everything she had learned to fight against during her legal education. Strategic Business Solutions, despite their legitimate-sounding name, was actually a consulting firm that specialized in extracting maximum fees from nonprofit organizations through complicated contracts that were designed to be impossible to fulfill completely. But Judge Judy's research team had prepared a completely different narrative. Internal show documents, later leaked to the New York Times and the Washington Post, revealed the planned approach: portray Watson as a dilettante actress playing at being a lawyer, using her celebrity status to gain attention rather than providing legitimate legal representation. The goal was to psychologically break down the actress and position Judge Judy as the voice of legal authority, calling out Hollywood's intrusion into serious professions. These celebrities think fame qualifies them for everything. Judge Judy had told her producers during a pre-show meeting. First they want to be singers, then directors, now lawyers. Someone needs to put this little girl in her place and remind her that real law isn't a movie script with happy endings. The production team had spent weeks researching Watson's background, but they had focused on her entertainment career rather than her legal credentials. They had prepared attack lines about her lack of courtroom experience, her privileged background, and her presumed naivety about real legal practice. What they had missed entirely was the depth of her legal education and her genuine expertise in the specific areas of law relevant to this case. Strategic Business Solutions' legal team had specifically requested Judge Judy's show because they believed the intimidating environment would pressure Watson into a quick settlement favorable to their client. They had calculated that a celebrity lawyer facing public humiliation on national television would prefer to avoid embarrassment rather than fight for her client's interests. They had underestimated both Watson's legal preparation and her understanding of media manipulation tactics. The corporate lawyers had also made a strategic error in assuming that Judge Judy's television court would provide a friendly venue for their case. They had expected the television judge to side with a corporate client against what they characterized as a frivolous nonprofit organization led by a celebrity lawyer. What they hadn't anticipated was that their case would become the vehicle for exposing the fundamental illegitimacy of television court proceedings. The studio audience was packed with Judge Judy's typical demographic: middle-aged viewers who trusted her legal expertise and enjoyed watching her put arrogant people in their place. Many had come specifically hoping to see the famous actress get Judy Ed, the popular term for being psychologically demolished on the show. The audience demographic skewed heavily toward people who felt suspicious of celebrities and enjoyed seeing them brought down to earth. However, the audience also included a significant number of young people who had been inspired by Watson's UN work and her advocacy for women's rights. These fans had come expecting to support their role model, not realizing they were about to witness a legal confrontation that would change television history. As Emma Watson entered the courtroom, She looked professional and composed in a tailored navy suit from a sustainable fashion brand she supported, carrying a leather briefcase that suggested serious legal preparation rather than celebrity posturing. Her transformation from the young actress, who had played Hermione Granger, to a confident legal advocate was evident in her bearing and demeanor. She moved with the purposeful stride of someone who belonged in legal settings, not the tentative steps of a celebrity out of her element. That Watson's preparation for this case had been extensive. She had spent months researching not just the legal issues involved, but also the format and practices of Judge Judy's show. She had watched hundreds of episodes, analyzed Judge Judy's patterns of questioning and intimidation, and prepared responses for every possible attack on her credibility or qualifications. Most importantly, Watson had recognized that this case represented an opportunity to challenge the entire concept of television court shows that prioritized entertainment over justice. She had consulted with constitutional law experts, media ethics scholars, and legal advocacy organizations to develop a strategy that would expose the fundamental problems with adjudicating real legal disputes in entertainment venues. Judge Judy emerged to thunderous applause, her imposing presence commanding immediate attention as she took her elevated position behind the bench. At 82, she remained formidable, her white hair perfectly styled and her black judicial robe lending authority to her small but commanding frame. Her entrance was choreographed to maximize intimidation, with dramatic lighting and camera angles that made her appear larger and more threatening than her actual stature. Her opening was calculated to establish dominance and diminish Watson's credibility immediately, using techniques she had perfected over thousands of television appearances. "Miss Watson, or should I say Hermione Granger, I understand you're playing lawyer today," Judge Judy began, her voice dripping with condescension that had intimidated countless guests over the years. "This courtroom deals with real legal issues, not Hollywood fantasy. Are you sure you're qualified to be here, or should we call your agent instead of the Bar Association?" The insult was designed to reduce Watson to her childhood acting role while questioning her professional competence and suggesting that her legal career was merely another performance. The audience chuckled, assuming this was typical Judge Judy entertainment, but Watson's expression remained composed and professional, showing no sign of the intimidation that usually followed such attacks. "Your Honor, I'm here as a licensed attorney in good standing with the New York State Bar, representing my client in this contract dispute," Watson replied calmly, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to speaking in formal legal settings. "I'm prepared to present evidence and legal arguments supporting our position, and I have all necessary documentation of my qualifications if the court requires verification." The response was perfectly professional and demonstrated that Watson understood courtroom protocol, but Judge Judy interpreted it as defiance rather than competence. Judge Judy's eyes narrowed with the predatory focus that had intimidated thousands of guests over the years. "Licensed attorney? Sweetheart, your little college degree doesn't qualify you to practice real law. This isn't some UN photo opportunity where you can smile prettily and read prepared statements written by other people." The attack was now fully personal, dismissing both Watson's education and her humanitarian work in a single devastating statement. Judge Judy was establishing the narrative that Watson was an unqualified celebrity seeking attention rather than a legitimate legal advocate with genuine expertise and experience. Watson remained calm, though observers noted a slight shift in her posture that suggested increased focus rather than intimidation. Her years of legal training had prepared her for hostile questioning, and her UN experience had taught her to maintain composure under pressure. "Your Honor, I'd like to present my opening statement and the evidence supporting my client's position, if that's acceptable to the court," Watson replied, maintaining the formal tone appropriate for legal proceedings. Judge Judy's laugh was harsh and dismissive, designed to humiliate and undermine Watson's authority. "Evidence? What evidence could you possibly have that would matter in a real courtroom? Did you Google contract law before coming here today, or did you just watch a few episodes of Law and Order?" The insult revealed Judge Judy's fundamental misunderstanding of Watson's preparation and credentials. She was treating the case as a typical celebrity humiliation opportunity rather than recognizing the serious legal challenge she was about to face. "Actually, Your Honor, Watson replied, opening her briefcase with practiced confidence that suggested extensive courtroom experience. I'd like to begin by addressing the fundamental jurisdictional issues that I believe invalidate this entire proceeding. The statement immediately changed the atmosphere in the courtroom. Jurisdictional challenges were complex legal matters that required sophisticated understanding of law and procedure, far beyond the simple contract disputes that typically appeared on Judge Judy's show. The audience sensed that something significant was happening, though most didn't understand the legal implications. Judge Judy's expression showed momentary confusion as she realized this wasn't going according to her usual script. Jurisdictional issues? Judge Judy repeated, clearly caught off guard by the technical legal terminology. This is a simple contract dispute between two parties. Don't try to complicate things with legal mumbo-jumbo that nobody understands. The response revealed Judge Judy's discomfort with complex legal concepts and her preference for simplified television drama over actual jurisprudence. Watson smiled for the first time since entering the courtroom, recognizing that Judge Judy had just demonstrated her limited understanding of fundamental legal principles. Your Honor, with respect, jurisdictional questions are fundamental to any legal proceeding and cannot be waived or ignored. The contract in question involves an international nonprofit organization operating across multiple state and federal jurisdictions, with performance requirements in several different countries. She handed Judge Judy a stack of legal documents with the confidence of someone who had anticipated this moment and prepared thoroughly. These are precedents from the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, and the International Court of Justice regarding jurisdictional requirements for contract disputes involving international organizations. Judge Judy glanced at the papers, her expression becoming increasingly uncomfortable as she realized she was facing legal arguments far more sophisticated than her television format was designed to handle. The documents were clearly authentic legal materials, not the simplified contracts and disputes that typically appeared on her show. Miss Watson, this court doesn't need lectures from Hollywood actresses about legal procedure, Judge Judy said, her voice taking on a desperate edge as she tried to regain control through her traditional intimidation tactics. I understand your position, Your Honor, Watson replied respectfully, maintaining the formal tone required in legal proceedings. But as a licensed attorney with a fiduciary duty to my client, I'm legally and ethically obligated to raise all relevant legal defenses. That includes challenging this court's authority to hear this case under applicable state and federal law. The statement was devastating in its professional formality. Watson was treating Judge Judy's television show as an actual court of law, forcing her to respond to legitimate legal challenges that her entertainment format couldn't handle. The phrase fiduciary duty was particularly powerful because it invoked professional legal obligations that transcended television entertainment. Judge Judy attempted to dismiss the challenge through her usual intimidation tactics, raising her voice to the level that typically silenced opponents. Young lady, I've been practicing law longer than you've been alive. I was deciding cases when you were still playing dress-up with your dolls. Don't lecture me about legal procedure. Watson's response would become the turning point that transformed the entire proceeding and ultimately Judge Judy's career. Your Honor, I respect your extensive experience, but I'd like to point out that your last formal legal practice ended in 1996 when you retired from the bench to begin your television career. Legal precedent and procedure have evolved significantly in the past 29 years, particularly in areas involving international law, constitutional due process, and media ethics. The courtroom fell silent as the implications of Watson's statement registered with both the audience and the television production team. She had just publicly noted that Judge Judy's legal knowledge was nearly 3 decades out of date, while her own legal education was current and comprehensive. Furthermore, Watson continued, pulling out additional documents with the systematic approach of a prepared attorney, I'd like to address the serious due process concerns raised by conducting legal proceedings in a television studio designed for entertainment rather than justice. She placed additional legal materials on Judge Judy's bench, each document clearly labeled and organized with the precision of someone who understood legal standards. These are ethics opinions from the American Bar Association, the New York State Bar Association, and the International Bar Association regarding the conduct of legal proceedings in media environments. The documents were real and substantial, representing months of research and consultation with legal ethics experts. Watson had clearly anticipated that this case would raise fundamental questions about the legitimacy of television court proceedings. The consensus among legal ethics experts is that television court shows create inherent and irreconcilable conflicts between entertainment value and legal representation. Watson continued. The time constraints, editing for dramatic effect, and pressure to create compelling television all fundamentally compromise the ability to provide adequate legal representation and due process. Judge Judy was now visibly struggling, her usual confidence replaced by obvious discomfort as she realized she was being systematically outmaneuvered by someone she had expected to easily intimidate. The legal arguments Watson was presenting were sophisticated and well-researched, far beyond anything Judge Judy had encountered in her television career. Miss Watson, this court has handled thousands of cases successfully over more than 2 decades, Judge Judy said, her voice lacking its usual authority and conviction. I don't doubt the entertainment value of those proceedings, Your Honor, Watson replied with devastating politeness that made her criticism even more effective. But I seriously question whether they met the constitutional requirements for due process and fair representation under the 5th and 14th Amendments. She clicked open her laptop and connected it to the courtroom's display system with the technical proficiency of someone accustomed to modern legal practice. I'd like to present statistical analysis of case outcomes on this show over the past 5 years, compiled by the Legal Aid Society and the American Civil Liberties Union. The screen displayed comprehensive data that Watson had clearly prepared as part of a systematic legal strategy. The charts and graphs showed patterns that would be damaging to Judge Judy's reputation and credibility. In 78% of cases involving defendants who attempted to present complex legal defenses, those defendants were interrupted, dismissed, or ridiculed by the court before they could complete their arguments, Watson explained, pointing to specific data points. The average time allowed for defendant presentations was 3.2 minutes, which is insufficient for adequate legal representation in any legitimate jurisdiction in the United States. The data was damning and revealed Judge Judy's show as entertainment masquerading as justice rather than a legitimate legal forum that respected constitutional rights. Additionally, Watson continued, analysis of case outcomes shows a statistically significant bias against defendants who appeared nervous, spoke with accents, or came from lower socioeconomic backgrounds. This pattern suggests that decisions were based on entertainment value and audience appeal rather than legal merit. The statistical analysis was comprehensive and professionally prepared, clearly the result of collaboration with legal research organizations and academic institutions. Judge Judy attempted one final intimidation attack, raising her voice to the level that had broken thousands of guests over the years. Miss Watson, you're way out of your league here. This isn't some university debate club where you can impress professors with fancy words. This is real life with real consequences. Watson's response would deliver the final blow to Judge Judy's authority and credibility, using information that would shock both the audience and the television production team. Your Honor, you're absolutely right that this isn't university-level legal education. My constitutional law professor at Columbia was Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg during her visiting professorship. My international law instructor was former UN Secretary General Kofi Annan. My contract law professor was Professor Charles Sable, the chief architect of the Uniform Commercial Code revisions. The credentials were overwhelming and positioned Watson as someone who had learned from the most distinguished legal minds in America and internationally. But she wasn't finished establishing her qualifications. My clinical work included representing asylum seekers before immigration courts, defending victims of domestic violence in family court, and challenging corporate practices before federal regulatory agencies. Watson continued, I've argued cases in 3 different federal circuits and consulted on international human rights cases before the UN Human Rights Council. The real-world legal experience was extensive and recent, in stark contrast to Judge Judy's television-based practice. But most importantly for this proceeding, Watson continued, I'd like to address why this case is actually outside your jurisdiction entirely and why your continued adjudication of this matter may constitute unauthorized practice of law. She handed Judge Judy a final document that would end the proceeding completely and potentially create legal liability for the television show. This is a formal motion to transfer this case to federal court. Based on the international nature of the contract, the constitutional issues raised by attempting to adjudicate complex legal matters in an entertainment venue, and the due process violations inherent in this format. Judge Judy stared at the motion, realizing that Watson had systematically dismantled her authority while demonstrating legal expertise that far exceeded anything the television judge could match. The motion includes affidavits from constitutional law scholars at Harvard, Yale, Columbia, and Stanford supporting the position that this proceeding violates fundamental due process rights guaranteed by the Constitution, Watson added. It also includes a formal complaint to the New York State Bar Association requesting investigation into whether this show's practices constitute unauthorized practice of law and potential sanctions for ethical violations. The final threat was devastating and potentially career-ending. Watson was suggesting that Judge Judy's entire television operation might be legally questionable, opening her to potential professional sanctions, legal liability, and the loss of her broadcasting license. Additionally, Watson continued, I prepared a civil rights lawsuit under Section 1983 alleging that this proceeding violates my client's constitutional rights to due process and equal protection under law. The lawsuit names both Judge Judy personally and the production company as defendants. For the first time in 25 years of television, Judge Judy was completely speechless. Her attempted humiliation of a celebrity actress had been turned into a comprehensive legal challenge that threatened her entire empire and personal reputation. The courtroom remained silent as Judge Judy processed the implications of what had just occurred. Watson had not only defended her client effectively, she had challenged the entire foundation of Judge Judy's television career and potentially exposed her to serious legal consequences. Your Honor, Watson said quietly, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had just demonstrated superior legal knowledge. I'd like to request a recess so you can consider the jurisdictional motion and consult with your legal advisors about how to proceed without further violating my client's constitutional rights. The request was both respectful and devastating, essentially forcing Judge Judy to admit she needed help handling legal arguments that Watson had presented effortlessly and needed time to understand challenges to her own legal authority. Judge Judy's response was barely audible and completely lacking in her usual commanding presence. This court will take the motion under advisement and recess for consultation. As the cameras stopped rolling, the audience sat in stunned silence, having witnessed something unprecedented. Judge Judy's authority completely undermined by superior legal knowledge, constitutional expertise, and meticulous preparation. Within hours, clips of the confrontation were viral across all social media platforms. Hashtag Emma Watson Law, hashtag Judge Judy Exposed, and hashtag Constitutional Rights trended globally as viewers shared their shock at seeing the powerful television judge outmaneuvered by actual legal expertise and constitutional knowledge. The reaction was immediate and devastating for Judge Judy and her production company. Legal scholars published analyses praising Watson's constitutional arguments and questioning the legitimacy of television court shows. The American Bar Association announced a formal investigation into the ethical implications of entertainment-based legal proceedings. What we witnessed was remarkable and historically significant, said Professor Lawrence Tribe of Harvard Law School in an interview with CNN. Emma Watson demonstrated that real legal expertise and constitutional knowledge trump television authority every time. Her arguments were sophisticated, compelling, and raised fundamental questions about justice in media environments. 3 days after the broadcast, Judge Judy's production company announced the show would be restructuring to better serve the interests of justice and constitutional rights. Industry insiders recognized this as an admission that Watson's legal challenge had created an existential crisis for the program that threatened its continued existence. The confrontation had transformed a routine contract dispute into a landmark challenge to the entire concept of television court shows, with implications that extended far beyond entertainment into fundamental questions about justice, constitutional rights, and the rule of law. Emma Watson had used her platform, legal expertise, and constitutional knowledge to expose systemic problems in how justice was portrayed and administered in media environments, creating lasting change in both entertainment and legal practice.